Welcome everybody to this very exciting session on Indigenous knowledge for climate resilience, organized by the British Council and Praxis at the University of Leeds on behalf of the UK's Arts and Humanities Research Council. Before we start, I would like to remind you that the event is being recorded and that it will be available on demand on the website of the Resilience Hub at COP26. It's my great pleasure to start the session today with a short film from the project Troubled Waters, Stormy Futures, which was led by the Bath Spa University and funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. This project is featured with other 30 projects funded through the UK's Global Challenges Research Fund and Newton Fund in a research report on heritage for global challenges, recently published by Praxis to demonstrate the relevance of heritage research to foster sustainable development and support the achievement of all the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. What does heritage mean in terms of accelerated climate change? Let's explore this by watching this short film that brings together some voices on climate change from Kiribati in the Pacific Oceans and explores what might be at stake.
I'm working with a group of researchers looking at heritage and what happens to heritage in times of accelerated climate change.
Either we build the islands up in order to stay out of the water, or we build floating islands, or we're not here. In other words, migrate. And so it's a combination of all of these things that we have adopted as our strategy.
We're looking closely at 3 different sites, one in Cornwall, Durgan, Porthinllain in North Wales, and then Kiribati, which is a low-lying island nation in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
We need to be aware that when you're referring to heritage, you're talking about various aspects of important aspects of your life. So we can talk about oral heritage, we can talk about heritage to do with the land, heritage to do with how we relate to people. So it's a whole broad area.
One very strong concept that I had some awareness of before travelling to Kiribati was this notion of ancestral land. And this was very much in my mind.
Our ancestral lands are not bought by us, we inherit them. It's given to us by our parents. And we know that this land were fought for by our parents in the old days. It cost a lot of blood for them. So it's sacred. With that land, it gives you your right as a Kiribati person to say, I am a Kiribati, I have a land here, you know.
It's one thing to be aware of the fact that 100,000 people plus may be displaced from their land, but it's another to really think, well, what does that actually mean to a person who lives in Kiribati?
The land in Kiribati is not merely a piece of real estate that you can put on the market and sell, because it's connected with your ancestry and your history as a particular clan.
With this land, I can pass it on to my children. I live on it, and I am not counted as a poor person. It gives me dignity. Our heritage is connected to our land, our culture, our language, everything that is Kiribati, our environment. That's our heritage that we are supposed to look after it, to pass on to our children and grandchildren. With the impact of climate change, one of them is we may be relocated. That is the biggest disaster, I think, for Kiribati people. I wouldn't know how to tell my children where I come from, especially my grandchildren, if Kiribati is not here.
Land in Kiribati is low. Land in Kiribati is very narrow in a lot of instances. And so when you talk about the challenges of climate change, it's very easy for people to say, When the sea comes, move back and move up. In Kiribati, we can't move back. You move back a few meters and you fall into the sea on the other side.
I don't think that by visiting a nation like Kiribati, which for me is literally on the other side of the world, that I can genuinely understand this culture after 3 weeks and make any kind of claim to an authentic form of representation. But I think what I can do, or try to do, is to travel humbly. It's to go somewhere with a camera and to listen.
It's not just a matter of seeing what you see in Kiribati. You have to talk with people. Because what you see, it might be different from what the people tell. Because we have different way of life, and therefore you can't just talk about what you see, and that's the story. All journalists have to understand the culture.
In Kiribati, you're not talking about one island country. You are talking about several islands in a country. And each island has their own unique culture. We talk about more than 20 different cultural heritage in Kiribati.
I put a question to a lot of the people in the outer islands, said, do you want to migrate? Do you want to move to another country? And most of the people said, no, we don't want to. I said, how can we fish? We know our ocean well. We know our coconut trees well. We live by those things. But how can we go and fish in unfamiliar shores, seas? Like, I don't think we will be able to survive there.
The land is very important to people in Kiribati because we've got so little of it. You can see how important it is by looking at our language. When you talk about land, it is called teapa. When you talk about people, we can say amata. We can also say teapa. So teapa can refer to people, teapa can relate to land. One and the same. You can't have one without the other.
So I read a lot of some documents, and also I heard some people from a Western world mention that Kiribati is one of the poorest island in the Pacific and in the world. And lots of people look at each other like, what? Sometimes we come to the question like, who are you to say that we are poor? Because we know here, like, we live subsistence. We live daily because we don't have fridge, we don't have this and that, but we fish what is enough for our family today. And we get our coconut trees, what is enough for our people, like my family. Sorry. So I don't believe we are poor.
Land is also very important, not only for the living, but also for the dead. And the line between the dead and the living in Kiribati culture is very fine. We move easily between the two. And dead people for us, dead ancestors, are as important as the living people, and we pay first respect to them.
Well, it's a burden to think about it. Like, how can you live a land that, all your families are buried, Maybe we have to dig everything, all our families up and put them together and we go with them. Maybe that's one way, but it is hard for us. My sister was buried here, my mom was buried here, my dad buried here. And I thought about, maybe I should go to Fiji or go to another country. I said, how can I go? My people are buried here. It's always at the back of my mind, how can I leave? How can I just leave them?
There's something very interesting about a filmmaker being taken to a site which is extremely important culturally, but actually there's nothing to see.
It is the place where they call it the cursed one.
Cursed one.
Yeah.
We also have ancestral sites, cultural sites, and they remain unoccupied by living people these days. I use that word unoccupied by living people deliberately because we still believe that they are occupied by the ancestors, by the spirits.
When we think of the effects of climate change, so rising sea level and coastal inundation, we often imagine that the threat is to property, land, built infrastructure and to natural resources like fresh drinking water. We don't automatically think perhaps of sites of spiritual or ceremonial significance being threatened and what that might do to the people who live there, to their sense of identity and to their culture. There's something about working as a filmmaker which brings you into this direct and intimate contact with these quite large, difficult subjects that you're trying to grapple with.
Thank you, Francesca, for sharing that video with us all the way from Kiribati in the South Pacific. My name's Rosanna and I am working for the British Council as Culture and Development Lead, and we're delighted to have those of you with us today for this session on Indigenous knowledge for climate resilience. It's part of the Resilience Hub at COP26 with a specific theme on arts, culture and heritage. So Praxis and the British Council are delighted to be partners on this session. To mark Adaptation, Loss and Damage Day for COP26, we are gathered here today to hear from representatives of Indigenous communities from across the globe, from, as we just saw, Kiribati, but also Malaysia, Brazil, Colombia. And this event will draw on real-world examples to explore two critical facets of Indigenous peoples' experience and practice: the growing impact that climate change has on Indigenous communities and their livelihoods, and the often overlooked role of Indigenous knowledge and traditional practices as a resource for addressing climate change and increasing climate resilience. The issues that will be brought to life for you today will include some short films interspersed with interactive discussions featuring researchers and practitioners working closely with Indigenous communities to address these challenges. And the reason that we're holding this session today is really to highlight the impact of climate change on Indigenous peoples and to highlight their relationship with nature and land. It's to make that connection between social inequalities and climate justice, and also to value and emphasize people-centered approaches, creative methodologies, action research and learning, and co-production. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker of today, Shak Koyuk, who's an artist and activist from the Temuan tribe of the Orang Asli Indigenous community in Malaysia. And Shak is joining us live this morning, or this afternoon for him, on this call. So I would like to introduce and bring to the screen Shak Koyuk.
Thank you so much for having me today. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the past and present of my ancestor, is the Temuan people of Kuala Lumpur and Selangor, because the way I live now is way Temuan people used to live. So I like to acknowledge that. And first of all, I like to say selamat datang or welcome to everybody to this beautiful time of year that we share our talk and share our knowledge. Now, so I like to have a few words about the situation in Malaysia. And here I like to share the screen of my presentation. So I think how to share. Right. My name is Shak Koyuk. I'm a Temuan Indigenous artist and activist. My works are primarily in helping the community of Indigenous people, and at the same time, I try to address that activism in my artwork. But today I would like to focus on the struggle that indigenous people in Malaysia have. Right. So in Peninsula, we have Indigenous Day or Hari Moyang. During the Hari Moyang, we are very focused on our Niji in respecting our ancestor and say thank you to our ancestor, and also the spirit of nature. So you can see here that we celebrating together with the nature. Nature is our part of our ecosystem, part of our family as well. So it showed how important nature to indigenous people and why we try our best to protect our environment before too late. And the young generation are also quite important in protecting the nature, is also practice our culture, and without the nature, our culture will be dead, will be perished. And that's another reason why we need the nature, we need the environment, because if we lost it, we're gonna lose it forever. And of course, in Malaysia, if you Google it, you notice there's so many logging activity and illegal logging, and often deal with the indigenous territory. So we often become forefront in stopping this logging, stopping this deforestation, because it will affect the whole life of indigenous people, especially in water, food, and so on. And we have to take our stand and protest on the street, send a memorandum to government to stop the projects, especially the project that really affecting the community of indigenous people. Not just that, it will destroy the environment and also biodiversity, because for us, tree, mountain, rivers, lakes, rocks, hill has a living soul in it. And for us, in order to respect it, in order for us to live together, we need to respect, and we need to take care of them as your sibling, as your family. And that's the reason why we protect the environment, protect the nature, protect the tree, protect the river, because this is where we came from. And we we don't ask much, but together stand with us, protecting the nature. I think that's the least you can do. And another thing, you have to respect our indigenous right, our land right, and our customary right, because without stand, without belief, without vision that we carry from many generations, that will sustain in the future. And because that's really important in indigenous people, especially in this time of the year and this time of the day, that we really need the nature, right? Better than we need money, because money won't feed you. You cannot eat physical money, but you eat the food you can grow, the food you can get from the environment. And for us, we need the justice. So any injustice happen in the indigenous people, and we want to acknowledge the existence of indigenous people. We need to acknowledge the indigenous people right. We need to take a stand, respect to the indigenous people around the world, because without us, we will have no future. For us, nature is everything. because even though we speak in different language, we came from different background. After all, we're living in one planet. We are interconnected each other. It's not just for human, but also for the nature, for the animal, for the insect, for the air, for the water, for the soil. We are interconnected. The problem is now we disconnected, and we try, best we can, as indigenous people, we try the best we can, try to connect that link, connect that disconnected problem. And because we're dealing with the capitalism, we just allow them to rule our life. We just allow them to make ourselves disconnected with the nature. That's the problem in this day. We don't let this capitalism rule our life. Just listen to indigenous wisdom and listen to the nature. If there's suffering, we need to do something. We need to connect to each other. We need to be together in this fight, in this problem that we have. And I believe, as everybody said, stronger, together make us stronger. And that's not just word. We need to be taking action together. Even though what country you're from, even though what language you've spoken, we need to stay together. We need to fight. We need to fight for our future. Right? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shak, for sharing with us not only your words, but your culture, and those images are really powerful and really bring the spirit of nature that you talked about to life. You made some very important points there about protecting our environment, the role of young people, and the connection with nature as your family, as well as the rights that we should all be entitled to. So land rights, customary rights, cultural rights. There are a couple of quotes that you said which were really powerful. So without nature, our culture would be dead. That's a very strong statement. And also that without us, there will be no future, and that we do have to work together. We are on the same planet. So despite our differences, despite different languages, different countries, different cultures, we're all in this together and fighting together. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Today is also the National Aboriginal Veterans Day, so a day of remembrance and commemoration of the contributions of Indigenous veterans in the First and Second World Wars. So I just wanted to highlight that as alongside COP26 and this being the Day of Adaptation, Loss and Damage, there are other very important, significant days that are being commemorated. And we'd now like to transport you to Colombia for a message that comes directly from the Piaroa people. This is part of our British Council's Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth project there called Sembrando Nuestros Saberes. We're working with Indigenous communities across the country, and the project aims to strengthen the local cultural heritage, ensure well-being and sustainability, and to really do this collaboratively with these communities in a people-centered approach, focusing on the preservation of their cosmovisions, their identity, and their territory. Sembrando Nuestros Saberes is in partnership with the Fundación Etnolano, Asociación Teje Teje, and the Cabildo Indígena de Guambia. So we will be sharing with you now a short video message that they have sent us directly from their community.
Ngô thơm mà tao này để cho thưa ha đây quan là cái mốt thưa thằng này quay sát tụi này tiêu tụi ngô thơm anh này tâm nó tao qua thái pun này ba pu khan thì này tôi mình này cáo gì để ju đào gì qua topa qua pa coroniana qua pa totomena qua time I would want time either o matani de you to hunt that take when thana quite shot to be neti utum ta ku pene buta utumati when ji pate kuturu water hanatu tamona kakatu kwantu come mene so pena te ku menete ya boko so llega pa tu pa pate utumate ku pene te ute pate
ये हो तो मैं देयु ना माता वाली देयु बैठा मैं समाज देयु बैठा मैं कहते हैं वो तो मैं देयु थाना पर वह ठीक भी दिन का कहते सब खोपा देयु थाना पर वह तमु मिने ठीक भी दिन का देयु तो हुई में तो बहते हैं तो तक वरना ये बुद्धि जो मैं तमाम तो बात तो तमाम बात वो मैंने तो खबर का थे समान पहले मैं nên thằng con tao ra bây giờ là một thằng này, bây giờ mấy thằng, tôi tụi mà một thằng, quay tiếng giá của nó của vào, nhìn này qua khát đá cả, qua vậy vậy thằng này, cái này kìa, qua vào đây kìa, qua đây như mà vào, nó này, bên này như nó, para poco mà tao đi đây như khá, chú cũng mà, khát cái đó, anh mình ra vậy. Hiwan na sofa na tadi tina tu. Pene tham thia ko, pene thana ko asal tu bai ni. Deyu thana ko asal tu bai ni. बहुत ना होता ना. Anu makan ta ta nu thana deyu thana ko asal tu. Tu na uti. De a ko ta me tu. Uthama. Ro tu sa bai na. बहुत ना पानु ta he bo khapai na tia da. Panu ta khapai tia tu me. पानी पिनिया रुआ खरो पावा वहाँ पे मैं वो थमोती ना तो पावा तेरो मैं तो वाई को मैं तेरो मैं तो वाई रे तो तेरो मैं तो पावा मैं तेजो वावा रुआ वावा तेजो वावा मरा वावा तेजो वावा कुसी वावा चुनते वावा बोली वावा रू वावा गादी वा तो वहाँ जाफे थम वहाँ जा की भाई ना तो भाई ना तो थमो तो कोई ना तो पहले तो हमें रोते खाना था वो तो ना दे जो मैं पान थाना को है ना वो तो हम पान थानी ने ते हाँ था वो तो कुमो तो कुने किया तो रोते यहाँ को तो दे पीजे मैं पान का थाना कहते हैं.
Okay, wow, it's so exciting to learn more about all these indigenous communities from the Pacific Ocean to Malaysia and now to Colombia. But it's now time to continue our discussion by learning from the research project Indigenous Food Systems, Biocultural Heritage and Agricultural Resilience, which provides some key insights on the role of indigenous communities, of indigenous knowledge and practices in facing climate change and its impacts, but also on the effects that climate change is generating on indigenous peoples and communities. This project was founded by the Global Challenges Research Fund and is led by Dr. Krystyna Zwiderska, who I welcome here, and is principal researcher on agricultural and biodiversity at the International Institute for Environment and Development. She is also expert in traditional knowledge and biocultural heritage of indigenous peoples and local communities. So Krystyna, welcome, and over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, I confirm we can see it.
Thank you. So yes, I'm going to talk about work with indigenous peoples through the AHRC project on indigenous food systems, but also previous research over the last 10 years. So many indigenous peoples, there are about 500 million indigenous peoples, they're already suffering quite severe impacts of climate change, even though they've contributed least to the problem. So in dryland areas, pastoralists and semi-arid farmers facing water and food shortages increasingly due to drought and erratic rainfall. In mountain areas, glaciers are melting, causing landslides, mud flows and water shortages. Arctic food systems are being very disrupted, people experiencing heightened risk. We've seen fires in the Amazon due to drought, coastal villages destroyed every year by typhoons and floods. And of course, this is very disruptive to people's livelihoods and exacerbates existing vulnerabilities. And in fact, thousands of people die of these typhoons and landslides and other climate-related disasters, and are displaced. And many of those people are Indigenous peoples. At the same time, Indigenous peoples have a great inherent resilience through their heritage, their biocultural heritage in particular, has proved really important for resilience. And this includes Indigenous knowledge, but also Indigenous crops and livestock breeds, biodiverse landscapes, and the cultural and spiritual values and customary laws that sustain them. And these, the biocultural heritage in Indigenous people's food systems is really vital for agroecological practices, which are very low carbon, for sustaining ecosystem services and for sustaining agrobiodiversity that reduces risk and provides options for adaptation. And also the spiritual values are really important for social resilience, social cohesion, solidarity, people helping those in need. So to give an example, in the Andes, the Quechua Potato Park in Cusco, they've seen much higher soil temperatures and soil pests, and their staple crop is the potatoes, which is also really key for their identity and their spiritual values. And they have had the lower planting line for potatoes has gone up by 200 meters in the last 30 years, and they've reached the top of the mountain, so they've run out of land because they have to keep going up and up and up to be able to plant the potatoes. So that's having a big effect on their livelihoods and on the diversity of potatoes, as well as melting glaciers on the sacred mountains, erratic rainfall and drought getting worse. So their response is to conserve their ancestral native Andean agrobiodiversity. They have very rich native potatoes, but also other varieties. And they do this through a collectively governed territory, which they govern on the basis of their Ailu Andean concept and Andean values of reciprocity, equilibrium, and solidarity with nature and within society. And it's these values that have ensured the maintenance of biodiversity and food security, despite these severe climate change challenges and also despite COVID-19. So the Ailu concept is basically about balance between the human world, the wild world, and the sacred world. And that is critical for well-being and resilience. And similarly in the Nashi Stone Village and in Yunnan, Southwest China, here there have been recurring spring droughts in the last decade. And here the Dongba religion has ensured the survival of the customary water management system, which has been really critical for resilience in this time, and also for resilience to pandemics and food and nutrition security. So the customary laws of these people are really important for protecting the forests and water resources and for promoting conservation of agrobiodiversity. And is central to this is their worldview, requiring balance between the spiritual world, ecosystems, and humans, which is central for adapting to climate change. Work with them identified over 500 biocultural innovations to enhance resilience. And we've had similar findings in India. In Kenya, just quickly to mention this semi-arid area, we're working with Michiganda people with the Rabai Kaya forests. And here they've had prolonged drought, erratic rainfall, and increased pests and diseases. And again, the response has been to return to indigenous crops and hardy land races, which are more resilient than hybrids promoted by government and other projects. And they are trying to establish a collectively managed territory to empower the Kaya elders to conserve their forests, because forest degradation and climate change has severely affected their water resources. So just a few conclusions to wrap up. Our work has shown that indigenous food systems are highly resilient. They include diverse drought and pest tolerant crop and livestock varieties, detailed local ecological knowledge, strategies to spread risk, and continual innovation to respond to climate change. The value of this indigenous knowledge has been recognized by the Biodiversity Convention, by the IPCC, by the Paris Agreement, but actually indigenous knowledge remains very marginal in national policies. There's still a lot of myths and misunderstandings that indigenous knowledge is old, unscientific, and very little integration at national level in climate change and biodiversity policies even, and even less in agriculture and food policies. So I think it's really important that we raise awareness that indigenous peoples have solutions for resilient, low carbon food systems, and the indigenous peoples must be recognized as experts and included as alongside, Western scientists in addressing these challenges. And I think, this is very urgent. Indigenous knowledge and biocultural heritage are disappearing fast. And unfortunately, most government policies at the moment are undermining and are contributing to this disappearance, where whether we look at agriculture, food, economic growth, conservation, education, various policies are pushing in the wrong direction. So for COP26, I think the key messages we need to share is that protecting indigenous knowledge for resilience and these ecosystems that they sustain, it is vital to protect their land rights and self-determination. And of course, tropical forests are vitally important for mitigation as well. But in fact, all indigenous peoples have very low carbon livelihood systems and are really critical for resilience of their peoples and the global climate system as a whole. So natural pastures and centers of agrobiodiversity, all of these are really important to protect for resilience to climate change. Indigenous peoples have their own solutions, their culture-based solutions, which are critical for part of nature-based solutions, so-called. And the COP26, I think, must recognize all of indigenous peoples as the experts and part of the solution, and must also address agri-food systems transformations, which it hasn't really done so far. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks to you, Christina. Thank you so much for sharing all these crucial and timely issues. And now, last but not least, I would like to welcome our final contributor, Paul Heritage, Professor of Drama and Performance at the Queen's Mary University of London and Director of the People's Palace Project. As part of his presentation, Professor Paul Heritage will also be sharing contribution from 3 of his team members: Tiago Jesus, Senior Project Manager of the People's Palace Project, and Takuma Kuikuro and Yamalui Kuikuro, 2 indigenous artists and filmmakers who have traveled from the Xingu indigenous territories in the Brazilian Amazon basin to join the COP26 and raise awareness to their fight to save the forest and rivers and to stimulate climate action. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And Francesca, I think you're going to show the slide, or someone's going to show the slides and videos. So please show the first slide. Thank you. It's been fantastic hearing the all these different presentations. I'm sure we're all talking in an incredibly unified voice, but it's wonderful to hear all the different aspects of it. So yes, if you can go to the first slide, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Yes, we're based at Queen Mary University of London, and Takuman Kwekuru, who you're going to be hearing from in a minute, is a fellow of Queen Mary. And one of the things that he's been writing about recently, as a result, we've been working together for about 6 years on different projects. And one of the things he's been addressing is how we in the universities can open up our universities to Indigenous peoples. It's been very interesting to hear him speak at COP, because he is constantly saying, don't give your money to the Brazilian government, don't give your money to NGOs, give your money that are not Indigenous, give your money to Indigenous people so that we can become biologists, lawyers, activists, filmmakers, etc. Takuman is a researcher and filmmaker. Next slide. So so we're actually going to be hearing, of course, from Takuman, but I'm just going to give you a brief overview of where the Xingu territories are. There, you can just see them in that slide, right in the bang center of Brazil. There's 16 different communities there. The territory is the size of Belgium, but there's 16 peoples, a total of about 8,000 people. So Takuman and Yamalui come from a people with about just under 800 people. You can see how important the Xingu is to them, to see it tattooed there on one of our comrades' bodies. Next. And they all share this characteristic of these circular villages. The Kwikuru is about 10% of the population of the Xingu, and certainly is a community that has thousands and thousands of years of history, certainly predating the colonial invasion and occupation by the Portuguese and other European powers. Next, and their main village, as in most of the Xingu territories, they live a largely first millennium existence. And it was important, Takuman wanted me to at least show some images, because Takuman himself is going to be talking to you from his hotel room in Glasgow, and he was a bit worried that people wouldn't actually understand where he came from. So this is very much where he came from, and he's going to be talking to you next about his life as a fighter, a fireman, a filmmaker, a researcher, and above all a fisherman, because they depend for everything on the river systems of the Xingu. Next. And Takuman has been co-curating this sequence of seminars called the Indigenous Research Methods, which for the last 3 years we've been working on together, and we're just reaching the end of a cycle which has a publication. So if anyone wants to get hold of a copy of our conversations and this publication with contributions from around the world, we'd be happy to share it. But I think I now hand over to Takuman himself, and you can just see what we're talking about in sharp relief in that photo taken by Takuman, which is on the right. Those on the left of the image is the soya fields, on the right is the Xingu territories. If they hadn't been made protected territories in the 1960s by a very different Brazilian government, the Xingu would not exist, and I don't think we'd have Takuman talking to us. So Takuman, over to you and the video. Thank you.
Olá, bom dia a todos. Eu sou Takuman Kwekuru. Eu sou da terra indígena do Xingu, estado de Mato Grosso, Brasil. Good morning, everyone. My name is Takuman Kwekuru. I am from the indigenous territory of the Xingu, of the Kwekuru people, that is in the state of Mato Grosso, in Brazil. Eu estou muito feliz de falar com vocês, compartilhar um pouco de conhecimento que eu aprendi sobre audiovisual, que é realmente que eu estou fazendo, estou trabalhando atualmente para meu povo. I'm very happy to be here, for being invited to be here with you and be able to share a little bit of my knowledge, what I do as a filmmaker, because I work as a filmmaker with my people, the Kwekuru people. Então, eu trabalho com audiovisual e realmente muito importante para a nossa comunidade, documenta nossa cultura através disso. Para a gente poder lutar através do audiovisual, levar a mensagem das lideranças para as pessoas conhecer nossa cultura através de audiovisual. So I work as a filmmaker And audiovisual filmmaking is a very important tool for our community because it's the way that we can tell our message, that our leaders can tell the world what is important for our community, so that we can document our rituals, our culture, and all that is important for us. And it's a tool of visibility for us because we tell the world our own stories.
Eu trabalho com PPP desde 2015, quando tive a oportunidade de fazer o filme que chama Londres como uma aldeia.
So I work with a PPP since 2015, when I was invited and I had the opportunity to create this film, London as a Village.
Pra gente, todos os indígenas são todos artistas. Tem um cantor, tem as pessoas que fazem a casa, tem a pessoa que faz tudo, né? Tem as pessoas que conhecem outro tipo de conhecimento, como artesanato, porque isso realmente são artistas. Isso é importante para a gente também compartilhar esse conhecimento, né?
For us, in Kwikuru, everyone in our village is an artist. So we have the traditional singers like Yamalui, but we also have people who build our houses. They are artists, people who do the crafts, people who do body painting. Everyone for us is an artist. So it's really important for us to have them involved in the process and to be recognized as artists and important in this exchange process as well.
Então, através desse trabalho que a gente teve projeto que chama Residência Artística nas Aldeias, onde a gente levou vários grupos dessas pessoas para conhecer também nossa realidade dentro da aldeia.
And we created this project with PPP called Residences in the Village, which was an exchange of indigenous and non-indigenous artists. And we had the opportunity to bring more people to the village to know and to meet our reality.
Importante trazer também o grupo das pessoas da aldeia, também conhecer outra realidade na cidade, apresentar também nossa cultura, falar da nossa preocupação, como nós temos muito preocupação sobre nossa terra, mudança climática, incêndio, florestais e outros que realmente está atacando nossa terra.
And this exchange project was very important for us because it was not just the non-indigenous people coming to the village, but also the Kwikuru artists leaving the village and having the opportunity to spend some time and to work outside of the village. And it was the opportunity for them to meet new technologies, new expertise, to create new contacts and tell these people and make it visible our struggles, what is important for us, our land, our territories, our struggles against climate crisis, the wildfires in the Amazon that have been really problematic for us over the past couple of years.
Muito fumaça aqui na aldeia, aqui, ó. Cara, ardendo os olhos. Isso nunca tinha acontecido aqui no Xingu. Tá cheio de fumaça, você não consegue nem respirar direito, você não consegue nem enxergar direito. Combater fogo aqui tá difícil, tá, gente? A gente tá tentando aqui apagar, só que muito difícil de a gente apagar, porque o fogo já espalhou quase tudo aqui no mato. Tá difícil, muito difícil.
Bom dia, meu nome é Yamalui Kwikuru.
Good morning, my name is Yamalui Kwikuru.
O Xingu, terra indígena do Xingu, é uma ilha de floresta.
So the Xingu Indigenous Territory is like an island of trees.
E a nossa luta agora é preservar.
And we are fighting to preserve it.
O agronegócio está avançando muito.
Agribusiness is invading our territory.
Está pressionando muito povos indígenas.
And it's putting so much pressure on us, indigenous people.
E a clima está pressionado também.
And also climate change is really affecting us.
A queimada, cada ano sempre vem queimando muita floresta.
The wildfires have increased over the last years and it's burning all of our forest.
E até ele montou o brigadista voluntários.
Yeah, and I'm really thankful that my cousin Takuma is leading the work in our community. He created this group of firemen.
Muito triste ver isso. Fogo queimando a terra do Xingu.
Então, a gente está muito preocupado. Nosso floresta está queimando muito, nossa mata está queimando aqui no Xingu. A gente está preocupando muito. A gente viemos aqui voluntário para apagar fogo aqui.
Estamos aqui para tentar salvar a nossa floresta. Nós podemos salvar animais, naturezas, matas e outras coisas também. A terra não é só da gente, não é só do povo indígena, para todos. E estamos tentando aqui salvar.
Importante a gente realmente mostrar a nossa realidade, como através do meu trabalho como cineasta, audiovisual também, que a gente teve a oportunidade de realizar também o primeiro festival de cinema indígena em Londres. Eu acho que muito importante para que as pessoas conheçam nossa realidade através disso, porque isso realmente, o sonho está sendo realizado, que a gente quer fazer mais acontecer o festival de cinema indígena e outros lugares também, outros países.
And this partnership just made one of my dreams come true as a filmmaker, because we have just organized the first Brazil Indigenous Film Festival in the UK, and it's really important that people here have the opportunity to know the work that we are creating and know the reality of our Indigenous filmmakers, what's going on the front line of the climate crisis and what we have been documenting and the importance of our culture. And we really hope that this is the first event that we can do other film festivals in the future.
Então é isso realmente nosso trabalho, né, junto com PPP e junto com a universidade também, que a gente tem essa oportunidade de trazer as pessoas. Não é realmente fácil, mas é difícil. A gente tem que realmente trabalhar para que a gente pode também conseguir outro tipo de projeto para que a gente pode trabalhar junto.
It's been wonderful to work with PPP and with the university, Queen Mary University, and it's been a challenging time. We've been working for a long time. It's always been challenging for us to organize funding, but we have made it happen, and we want to carry on working and finding new ways of sustaining the work that we have been doing over these 5 years.
E agora realmente nosso sonho também para que a gente pode também ter cota indígena dentro da universidade, um sonho que a gente pode ter também, que a gente, porque hoje em dia a gente tem que estudar realmente duas coisas, né? A cultura dos brancos, sem perder nossa cultura. Isso que é importante, sabendo que é importante hoje em dia a gente lutar pelos nossos direitos, como COP26 está acontecendo em Glasgow, e isso realmente para que a gente pode representar nossa comunidade através desse conhecimento. E os jovens podem estudar, falar inglês, falar outras línguas, para que a gente pode defender nosso direito através desse conhecimento.
And another dream that I have is for us to develop more partnerships with the university and create the opportunity for our young Indigenous people to be part of the universities here in the UK. Because for us, we have to learn, we have our own language, and we have learned another language so we can communicate and dialogue with no Indigenous people. And I understand that one of the next steps of our fight is to learn and to have Indigenous leaders speaking fluently English. Because like now, I am here in Glasgow participating in COP26, and it's really important that we have this protagonism, that we are able to speak by ourselves and for ourselves in these spaces.
Thank you. I'm aware of timing, so I don't want to add anything else to what what Thiago has been saying, but just to say that if anyone wants to look at our work, we have lots of stuff on our YouTube channel, and the book I mentioned is available digitally as a download on our site, but we can also send you physical copies. We like books. So please keep in touch, and thank you for the invitation to join you today.
Thank you very much, everybody, for this very rich and inspiring session. I would like to thank all the speakers, those who are here and those who just attended with virtual contributions. So thank you to Sarah Penryn-Jones, thanks to Shaq, the PROA Peoples, Christina, Paul Heritage and his team, and of course to our co-leader, Rosanna from the British Council, and the whole Praxis team who is working hard behind the scenes to make this possible. Hope to meet you somewhere in the world in the next month. Bye. Thank you so much.